Going live. Welcome to the Business and Bytes podcast, where it's another week of us hanging out, talking about AI, cybersecurity. We get the opportunity to break down some big topics for the business minds. For all of you out there who are watching, thanks for joining us. Here's a couple housekeeping things before we get started. Number one, if you want to comment on directly to us so we can answer questions, you want to go over to the Business and Bytes podcast Facebook page. So make sure you go over there. If you try to comment on one of our personal Facebook pages, we may not be able to respond. We sometimes see them, but that's the best way to keep track of our podcast as we come together every week. So if you have questions, please comment on one of the social media areas, and we may get to them live, especially if it's relevant to the conversation that we're having today. We're going to talk about regulations. You guys excited about regulations?
No one's ever excited about regulations, but I feel like it's a topic that needs to be spoken about, as me and Brian were saying offline. So, we're going to tackle it for you guys today, and let everybody know where they should stand and how they should be approaching the matter.
And in true Business and Bytes podcast fashion, we'll try to make it fun. That's my goal. So we'll see how fun we can make it, because no one really loves talking about regulation. So great. Well, let's just jump right in and talk about why are cybersecurity regulations becoming more aggressive. We're definitely seeing this in cities. We're seeing this across the world. Like we're seeing the UK, Australia, and some big governments like enforcing regulations in ways that we've never seen before.
Yeah. So, digital risk because digital risk is an economic risk. One breach can ripple through supply chains, markets, and everything else. So, for example, what we were talking about offline, I want to bring it up. There's a pretty big, in our industry at least, a pretty big distributor, Ingram Micro, and they were just hit last week. And every forum I go to, every thread, every IT conversation I've had this week has brought up the subject of Ingram. We don't use them a lot, but sometimes we use them as a distributor to buy hardware. And this morning I had a situation where I had to purchase hardware for a client, and I'll price match a couple of my different distributors, and I go to log on and I can't log on because they're still down. So they have a message on their website that says, we're tending to an urgent cyber incident, something. People are upset because, one, the communication of it, right? There hasn't been a lot of communication. It's been very, very blatant type thing here and there, or non-existent. And two, a lot of companies like ours depend on distributors to not only hardware, but software or Office 365 licenses, or just anything, right? So this becomes a ripple effect. It affects them, it affects us, then it affects our client. And then if it affects our clients, it's going to affect their customers, their vendors, their everything. So it's just an example of how a breach can trickle or ripple across a certain industry and just affect everyone.
A lot of people think that they're too small to matter in the world. And the truth is that most cyber attacks are focused on small business nowadays. They're not focused on the large businesses. They can hit 100 small businesses and get more money in ransom and in other rewards that they try to get than they can get by hitting a large business like Ingram.
Yeah, and I saw that this last week. I had a client, really small little electrical company, couple man operation that we did a little quote for, did some work for, and they got hit last week with a business email compromise. And most people don't understand, like, if you have a business email compromise where people are in for a long period of time, you need to do forensics. Like, you need to actually get in and figure out what was taken, what information was stolen, what kind of emails went out. You really want to know what happened. And that's not a cheap solution. It can be a $7,000 thing for a really small business. It can cost a lot of money. And it can be sticker shock when you get to that moment where you have to decide, do I really want to know how my business is impacted? Like that's a really big question that you have to figure out. And you've got to figure out how valuable that is to you. And I would beg to say it's really valuable. It's really important to know how your business was affected by any cybersecurity incident you have, versus like would have been a client, most likely would have seen it fast and we would have responded. It wouldn't have cost them any extra money. Like those are the types of things that I believe the governments are starting to realize we need to kind of force the hand of businesses, because insurance companies are forking out a lot of money. Businesses are losing their livelihood because they're falling for these attacks. And then we're seeing it across even government, like cities and infrastructure and things like that. Even in the new big, beautiful bill, I did some reading of it, had ChatGPT do a little analyzation. And there's a bunch of cybersecurity related stuff in there specifically for government, and kind of forcing research and development money into the organization to try to actually keep the government more secure from cybersecurity incidents. And I just don't think most people realize, like LastPass is another one that was hit in our industry about, I think it's now 4 years ago. And I think most people today will not be judged by whether they had a cybersecurity incident. They're going to be judged by how they handle it.
Absolutely.
Right? So great example. LastPass did a really absolutely horrible job. Every week was like, oh, we are a little bit more compromised than we thought we were. Like at first it was like, we're good, we had nothing. And then it just got worse and worse and worse. And to the point where a lot of us jumped ship and went to someone else, not because they got hacked, but because they handled it really poor. Versus I sat in a cybersecurity conference out here in Washington and sat with one of I think it's Whitman College out in Washington State here that got hacked. And I listened to how they responded. And the thing that the attack vector was a 0-day network infrastructure attack. So it was something that even the vendor of that firewall didn't know was a vulnerability. But they had a working plan. And the event went so good compared to how it could have, that the guy got promoted who was running their IT afterwards. Generally people don't get promoted after they have a cybersecurity incident. Like
MSPs get fired after an attack, and this guy got promoted. We gotta try to bring him on the show and have that conversation. You should see if you can reach out, maybe have him as a guest, and we can walk through some of it.
I'll see if I can reach out to him. It was a fantastic conversation at this cybersecurity conference that I went to, where he just talked about that.
Yeah, honesty is loved a lot more than just trying to hide behind things. We had just last month, we had a county just to the north of us here in New Mexico, Taos County, and they got hit pretty badly. It knocked down almost all the systems in the county. They were trying to not admit what it was, and then it came out, and they were down almost close to a month, at least 3 weeks out of the month. And that's bringing a whole county down, court system, bringing down the treasurer's office in the county. I mean, brought the whole county to a halt, and they couldn't conduct any business. And that's pretty critical. That has a ripple effect, not to the county, but to all the organizations and all the states, the state doing work with them. So, these things are hitting even little counties and states that you would never think they would hit. Yeah. But they're here and they're not going anywhere. And, we have these conversations daily with clients, and, people are starting to realize, because they're seeing it in the news, and they're starting to dig a little bit more. They're trying to figure out what's going on and what's happening in the world. Yeah. And then the regulation now has much stronger and much sharper teeth than the regulation had in the past. So that's something, to be aware of while we process that with clients and as we go forward. And, there's businesses that have gone out of business that I personally know of. Thank goodness we weren't doing work for them. They couldn't pay the fines for their PCI breaches. They couldn't pay their fines for their HIPAA breaches. So this is a real thing, and it affects businesses, and it's affecting businesses way more now than it ever has.
Well, I don't think people realize. Like, here's a great example. I hopped on the IC3 website. So for those of you who don't know what that is, it is the place where you can report cybersecurity incidents to the FBI. It's their main source of where people can report all that information. And literally, I got on literally just now, and in like 5 seconds, I found this graph. And you look at it, and literally we're talking about 5 seconds in, and we've got this graph that shows that in the last 5 years, over $50 billion is reported as lost because of cybersecurity.
And that's only the reported ones, John.
That's the crazy part about IC3 is it's underreported significantly. They think that there's up to 40% that's not actually reported to the FBI. Now look at the chart though. That's what's astonishing. So if you look at 22 through 24 of that $50 billion, you've got 10, 22, 30, whatever, 40, almost 40 of that 50 billion was in the last 3 years.
The statistic I heard a couple months ago was that the amount of hacking that goes on in the world, the loss to businesses as a whole in the world is the same loss that 4 of the economic impact of the LA fires had. And that is a ridiculous amount of money.
Well, even bigger than that, it's now bigger than the drug. Cybercrime is now bigger than the drug trade. So imagine if several years ago, the president sat down and announced to the nation that there's now a drug on wars. So imagine the equivalent of that now being a drug on cybercrime. As John brought up, the government has to get behind this, because if no one does, where are we going to end up, right? Who's going to get hit? So we need to start regulating. So they're starting with the industries that have the most effect, right? Government, contracts, defense. Then you get into people that are under finance. Banks are definitely regulated. They're holding everyone's money. So anybody that has to be insured or has data that would be crucial to someone receiving it or obtaining it in any type of way, it needs to be regulated.
Wow.
And that's a good segue to our next segment here, because now we're starting to get these smaller businesses that need to be regulated. And before, it was the wild, wild west. So a lot of them, I was approached by IRS enrollment agent. That's sort of like between an accountant and a CPA, somewhere in there. And they said, oh, I hear that now I need a WISP, a written information security policy. And I said, yes. So let's sit down. Let's have our first time appointment. And we went through everything. And she said, well, I don't want the price for you to keep working with me. I want you to set the stuff, and then we're good. Like, give me a one-time fee. And I said, well, that's not exactly how this works. If you can look right here on the WISP guidelines or requirements, it says who's going to be doing your ongoing, compliance for you. Who's going to be checking your backups? Who's going to be auditing your logs? Who's going to be checking logins? And I try to have that conversation with them, and I never heard back from them. So I get it. It's a lot, and it's coming down from the top. And sometimes we don't want to listen to quote unquote demand on what we should do within our own business. But it's the reality of where we're at today with cyber threats and where we are in the world. And we just have to acknowledge it.
Totally.
I always like to say crickets can be expensive. We had a similar situation. A CPA firm reached out to us that we had never done work for, and they just wanted us to write their policy. And we said, sure, we'll write it for you, but it's only going to be as good as the day we deliver it to you if you don't have the follow-on services to track everything and make sure things are being done right and make sure things are secure. And it's not just buying a hammer. It's, making sure that hammer is in the right tool belt, making sure it's there every day, making sure that hammer can drive the nails in properly. Sorry for the analogy, but it's an easy analogy to understand for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy just the amount of stuff that we're seeing, and just literally the people who have this attitude of, well, I'll just go buy new computers, not thinking about that. All their data most likely is sitting on the cloud. Like, it's not going to do you any good. Like, buying new computers is a fraction of the problem, when most of the problems that we're experiencing today is data related. So, like, you look at that statistic I just showed, right? This whole thing, $50 billion of data loss. That's not $50 billion of work that was from a IT industry. That's $50 billion worth of data loss that happened because of cybersecurity incidents. So, like, what's more valuable today? It's your data. And if you go through, I'm going to actually post these. I'm actually working on posting these in the link. I'm gonna post these into as many of the what do you call it, the chats that I can, as many of the posting areas as I can. But I've got the IC3 reporting that I've got going out, so you can actually go to the link and then go to the annual report as well. And if you go to the annual report, the breakdown is crazy. Like the breakdown of the stuff that you can see that the FBI is reporting, again, underreported. The amount of money that's being lost is astonishing.
Yeah, my heart always goes out when a small business, like even like a 2 or 3 person business, contacts us, or even a 20 person business or a 50 or 100 person business. My heart goes out to those folks that say, well, we can't afford it. And my next comment is, if you can't afford this, you definitely can't afford a breach. Because and it's not just the cost of the breach; it's the loss of customer trust.
I like that line a lot.
Thanks. It's the loss of the customer trust. It's the loss of that reputation that you have as a business. That's worth more money than even the breach, because that's the money that is your future opportunity cost. That and when we talk in those terms, people understand it, but it's almost like going back to the days. Why do I need an alarm system on my house?
Yeah.
Why do I need? I don't need that. That's not important. But then somebody breaks in because they broke the lock that you put on, and now they're in your house, and now they're doing something that's bad. Well, we don't want people to get in your house, in the world, and in your networks.
Exactly. Neither does the government. I mean, that's why you got to think like, okay, you've got small business. Small business is a different segment. And for small business, the government looks at that as like, that's the engine that makes money in the United States. So we want to protect those businesses, they don't go under. But then you have infrastructure. And so here's another graph. I'm graphing it up today. This is cyber threats to critical infrastructure. So these are the types of things that the government is seeing. Some of these cross over into, like, transportation can cross over into small or mid-sized business. Food and agriculture can cross over into small and mid-sized business. Commercial facilities, information technology, we're in there, financial services. There's a lot of stuff going on, and the government's seeing all this stuff and being like, we got to do something to keep not just our critical infrastructure under control, but we got to keep small businesses from losing out here, because they're the work engine. They're the ones that employ people. Like, how do we actually protect them? And unfortunately, it's regulation and it's enforcement, and it's saying, hey, if you lose customers' data because you didn't do the right things, we're going to start holding you responsible for that.
So why don't we touch on a couple small ones, and we don't have to get too deep into the weeds, but just let people know, if you're kind of in this sector, if you're doing things like this, you're going to run into stuff like this. So for instance, the FTC safeguard rules, a lot of those, the business that fall under it are what are called non-banking financial institutions. So it's anyone that deals with credit or money, but they're not a bank. So your mortgage brokers, your CPAs, your accountants, sometimes your realtors. I believe I can't think of it. Car dealerships. Along those lines, you're regulated by the FTC safeguard rules, and that's just one example. Then you have HIPAA. HIPAA is usually medical records. I'll let you guys chime in on a couple others that you might be dealing with here and there.
Yeah, PCI is a big one. What business exists today without taking credit cards? We have about 150 monthly clients that we do work for, and just two don't take credit cards. That's a very small percentage. The PCI regulations that just came out at the end of March of this year, they were just enacted, the version 4. They are put a lot more teeth into the system. They are requiring a lot more. We do work for some very small businesses, a store with 5 people that work there, and they have to be PCI compliant. And they're like, but I don't have the money. And then it gets back to, well, what can you do to protect it? And, unfortunately, there's only so many ways we can whittle that piece of wood down. And, you need to do some kind of level of protection to protect you. There was a liquor store that had us come in and do some post-mortem investigation for them. They had a PCI breach. I think their fine was somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.3 million. We were not supporting them, but they came in. They had us do the other stuff. They went out of business because they didn't have any insurance for it. And they just totally said, we're out of business. We can't do this anymore. And, it was a family-owned business that they were ready to pass down to the next generation. And that's the scary part. You have this nice nest egg that you can pass down to the next generation so they can make money for their family and pass it down to the next generation. And that's what we love to see in our industry. Is we just love to see that the changing of the guard and going through generations or going to new people. And, they couldn't do that. And their kids that were probably in their early 20s had to go out and get jobs, and they couldn't run the family liquor business anymore because they had to close their doors. So, these are real. These aren't just pie in the sky thoughts, ideas. And, but PCI is a big one. And I don't know of many businesses that can survive without taking credit cards.
No. And I recently saw a stores, like a family-owned grocery store that had half their network compromised. So the PCI side was okay, but all the other side of their infrastructure completely got hacked. And the owners are just kind of like nonchalant about it. They're like, it just kind of sucks,
That's good that their PCI side was safe, though, John.
Yeah, right.
I think the stat is 64% of businesses go under within 6 months of a breach.
Right.
And I don't think people come to terms with what that really means. That means if you're hit today, within 6 months, you're looking for a 9 to 5 again, or trying to start a new business from scratch. And the idea of that scares the bejesus out of me.
So what do we do? What kind of things do you all do for your clients that can avoid these traps and avoid these, spirals?
So I guess what you mean is, let's talk about what is the upside of it look, right? If we are giving them compliance and we are putting these frameworks into place, what happens? Well, the simple ones are you improve your uptime, you improve your security. You might have lower cybersecurity insurance. It's kind of like driving insurance. Are you a good driver? Do you have ABS brakes? Does your car have security? Is it kept in a garage? Like, if you check off all these boxes, and for some reason, kids with good grades in school, I had a discount for that for some reason. But if you check off all these boxes, then your cyber insurance bill can also be a little bit lower. But it gives you the peace of mind. It gives you the peace of mind that you're compliant. You know that your insurance company is not gonna disqualify your claim because you've checked off all the boxes that need to be checked off, right? That's another thing. Oh, I'm doing cybersecurity, or I'm doing a couple things enough. The cybersecurity should cover me. But I think we've covered this in a previous episode, and if we haven't, then I'll mention it again. Insurance companies don't like to lose. They're going to do everything in their power to neglect your claim and not have to pay it, right? Just throw your claim out the window. So to do everything that they're asking you to do so that your claim can be taken seriously, compliance is one of those things.
Yeah. I think it's just fascinating that people will just think, well, I'm just going to use insurance to cover myself, and they're neglecting to realize, for one, we're in a new world, right? There's regulation that's coming from government, but now there's regulation that's coming from insurance companies, and I think more so than government over the next couple of years. Even we're seeing it now. It's going to be insurance companies that are going to drive requirements. So for somebody to know that they're protected, they're going to have an actual risk assessment done that's approved by the insurance company. And you're going to have to be able to show that data to the insurance company and what you've done to ensure that you don't have an incident. And I think it's just people don't understand the amount of money. Like most small businesses, what do you think an average small business can't afford to lose in one shot? Like
their bank account, their client.
How much? Like put $1 to it. Put $1 to like if a business lost, what's the threshold for somebody can't lose X amount of money and they go?
I think it depends, but I think 50, 100K, which can easily.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Emilio.
Yeah. So you look at like somebody loses. Like here's where I'm going with this. The number's a little different, but this is just loss. This is highs and lows, but again, more statistics because I'm just nerding it up today. The average loss reported by IC3 was about $20,000, just under $20,000,
and that's on the low side.
And that accounts for the low. But what it doesn't account for is it doesn't account for all the other things that have to be done in order to recover. So when you think about loss, it's not just about what is the data worth that you lost. It's about replacing or fixing computers. It's about reputation management. It's about if you're in HIPAA or PCI, it's about making sure that you notify people. I met with a client that I'm not going to reveal the name or who it is or anything, but they're a religious organization and they had a data breach and they had to go send out credit monitoring to people because of it.
Yeah. And the nice thing about cyber liability insurance is that would most likely cover that cost.
Correct. Yeah. So, I mean, that's where we're going. And we're literally going to a place where if you live in a world where you can't afford to be down and uptime is valuable to you, there's one reason. If you can't afford to lose customer data because it's going to hurt your business or it's going to put you in a place where you have to spend money to keep your world together, you need to have cyber insurance, especially in that HIPAA, PCI, in that FTC safeguards world.
Yep. We do work for a few car dealerships, and car dealerships have had to come to grips for this over the last 5-7 years, and they're considered a bank to the government because they're doing financing, and a lot of CPA firms fall under FTC safeguard rules now too because of what they do. They're paying payroll, they're handling money on behalf of their clients, so they fall under that rule too, and that's relatively new. But you would think, well, a car dealership's not a bank, a CPA firm's not a bank, but they're handling money on behalf of other people. So.
Yeah, finance adjacent businesses.
Yes.
So if somehow you're on that level of, you do things like they do things with finance, then that's who they're coming after. Yep.
Yeah, I think it's important just to realize that you've got to be thinking about this. You've got to be thinking about this now, so that you don't have an incident.
I had a client last week. And the owner of the business looked right at me and he goes, "Oh, I just check yes to all those questions on the questionnaire for my PCI." And I looked right at him and I didn't even know what to say. Like no words were even coming out of my mouth. And I was silent. I just stared right at him and he looks back at me and he says, "Well, what's wrong with that?" And I said, "Well, there's a lot wrong with that." And then I was silent and I didn't even know what to say. I was so dumbfounded.
I got an idea. So he says, "What's wrong with that?" And you say, "Well, if you love throwing money away." And he's going to say, "What do you mean?" Well, you're paying them their premium for the year, and any claim that you give them is going to be denied because you don't have any of those things. So I'm just asking them, do you like throwing money away? And I kind of see.
But I walked out of there
with
with
that's just what popped up in my head right now.
I walked out of there with like a full contract signed because he said, "Oh, I need to actually do this. I need to do something with this." And it was like a 20 employee business that, makes $5+ million a year. That's nothing to sneeze at. And but I was to the point, I was in like, we're in 2025, guys. What made you think that was okay? It's like going to the doctor and just closing your eyes and all your intake forms, you're just checking off random boxes.
Yep.
How can the doctor help you? And but my silence is,
of course. Doc, I said I'm healthy here, so I don't know
why am I here?
What are we going to do if I'm healthy?
But it's 2025 has been a big wake up call for businesses, and I think that the world is really grasping what needs to be done, that we can't answer yes to everything on a questionnaire, that we need to talk to a qualified professional, and talking to your IT company, your IT department. If you don't have someone to reach out to, talk to one of us. Even if you just have questions, hit us up on social media.
I think that's where most people don't understand. So people assume that how do I word this? People assume that maybe us being higher end IT firms are just walking in, throwing a number out. This is a reason why we do assessments. This is a reason why those are part of our normal world that we live in for business, because I can build the right IT support for the right client. And I always tell people this: if you're selling jewelry, you have a different level of cybersecurity than if you're banking, or if you're HIPAA, or if you're in some really heavily compliance related system, or if you're in manufacturing and uptime is your thing. Like if you know that every hour that you're down, you lose $100,000, an hour every time you're down, you're going to have to look at that a lot different. And so we can build the right system for the right people if we know what's actually going on. And that's why talking to somebody who does a risk assessment for real, I think is more valuable.
I think I can speak for all three of us. We don't rubber stamp. When we see a client, we don't just rubber stamp, or the client doesn't fit in a compartment. We find out what the client needs to perform their job, what the client needs to perform to make sure they're secure, what they need to make sure they're compliant. And that's how we work. We customize things to clients. Rubber stamping doesn't do the job, and it actually makes it insecure.
That's totally true.
300%.
Yes. So what can we offer to our viewers today, that just some tips where they can start, and if they don't know where to start?
So while we wrap up here, I think we discussed, do you fall under PCI? Do you fall under FTC? Do you fall under this? There's a lot of people that are asking, well, what if I don't fall under anything? Well, technically, you sort of do. So for those people, what you want to follow is the NIST, right? So if you go to NIST, NIST, Small Business Cybersecurity Corner, it's free and it's packed with self-assessments. It has, I think there's like a 45 to 50-minute video on there that kind of explains what it is all around. This is one of those standards that are used industry-wide, right? So if you don't know what you fall under, NIST is a very good guide for where you should start and what you should start implementing within your business, or just anyone that needs to be compliant in some type of way.
Check in with your credit card processor. They're going to have PCI checklists that you can work with, and that'll give you a place to start. If you don't understand something, give your IT department, give your IT folks a call. Reach out to someone that is qualified to understand what the questions mean and what they're actually asking for.
Yeah, and I think it's a matter of everybody. If you're owning a business and you're out networking, You've run across an IT person. So you should ask some questions about them, about their cybersecurity care. I don't know what the word is. Like, how much do they really care about cybersecurity? Because I run into IT people on a regular basis who are like, nah, you don't really need all that crap still, which is insane in 2025 that we still have that floating around.
Okay.
But I mean, what do? We have to keep pushing and making sure that you ask some really good questions about methodology, or like, what is cybersecurity important? And if they say no, then hopefully they say yes. But I think it's worth talking to a couple different people. And if they're not willing to put together an assessment for you as their primary starting point, I think I'd be kind of leery, because they don't know what you actually have. They don't actually know how your system works. They haven't asked enough questions.
And if you're going on a hike, would you trust the guide that, read the book and never actually went out and into the woods, or went out into the desert to do their hike? Would you trust the guide that has been there, done that, and knows every twist and turn in the trail? So I would trust the guide that has the experience.
My wife and I were hiking yesterday, short hike, and we were telling stories about where you went on an adventure, and somebody said, "Oh, the end is just over this next hill." And my wife told me this story about how she went out hiking at this one place with some friends, and she had only been there like once, where she made a wrong turn and went on the wrong trailhead, and she thought it was the 2-mile hike or the 3-mile hike. It was the 7-mile hike. And she said, yeah, no one went hiking with me anymore after that.
Was the Gilligan and Skipper with her?
I don't know. That happened to me with a young guy I was mountain biking with years ago. I was giving him a hard time and say, oh, it's just over that next hill, because we did like a 35-mile mountain bike ride through the forest, because we got on the wrong trailhead that he said he knew where he was going. And we literally left at noon and got back to his house. He lived kind of close to that area at like 10 o'clock at night.
Oh,
and it was a long day. But the whole point is, like, you want to be around people with cybersecurity that are intimately involved in talking about it, thinking about it on a regular basis, and it's a core part of what they do. Tech support is a minuscule part of IT now. Mm-hmm. Tech support is what helps keep the wheels turning during the day, but it's not the core thing that keeps businesses alive today.
It's the grease that keeps the engine going.
But I was sitting with the new CFO for one of my clients, and we kind of had our intro meeting. And he's like, man, you're talking a lot about cybersecurity. This seems like it's your thing. And I said, what phone do you have? And he's like, well, I have an iPhone. I said, when you walked into the phone store, did you ask if this does picture and video messaging? Or did you ask what else does it do, right? You expect a phone in these days to already do picture and video messaging. But you want to know what else does it do besides the model that you had from either last year or 2 years ago. So I said, so that's the same thing with IT. You should expect my guys to be knowledgeable, to be responsive, and to know how to do IT and troubleshoot. So now what do I do different? That's cybersecurity.
Yeah. I'm throwing another link in the chat because I'm full of information today. One of my favorite documentation things, especially for businesses that are smaller, like under 5 employees, I know they always feel left out, and there might be some of them watching. I put on the FTC released a really good cybersecurity for small business pamphlet, and it has a lot of really good stuff, especially for the small guys who just need to get started and be doing something. So it's a really great thing you can download to make sure you've got some resources. That's really important. And then as you get bigger, it gets more complicated, and that's where you definitely want to sit down with one of us. And I don't know about you guys, but if someone here locally, either in Olympia, Thurston County, Pierce County, Western Washington, or Eastern Washington, Spokane, wants to go out to lunch, I will take you out to lunch to talk about cybersecurity. So I'm just throwing it out there. You can send me a message and we'll go do lunch, and I'll give you kind of just an initial assessment of your next steps for your business. just, thought I'd throw
I
it
echo that in the Florida
up the
region.
ante. See if you guys are going to take people out to lunch too.
Yeah. I echo that. I'll do the same.
So now people in Florida and New Mexico, you're welcome. You now have lunch on these two guys as well. So
And Pennsylvania and New Jersey.
yeah,
Put that in the comments. Put that in the comments in case
Put
somebody
it in the
watches
comments if you
later.
want lunch from one of the three of us.
No,
And
you put it in the comments for You put it in the comments so that when they're watching the video, they know from the beginning.
Want
that
lunch?
In the specific areas, we're taking people to lunch and talking about cybersecurity policies for their business at no charge.
Yes. Add Pennsylvania and New Jersey to that, John.
Yeah, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, your states, and South Florida, anywhere from West Palm down.
Okay, let me see here. I'm going to go. You guys keep talking. I'm going to get this in there.
What about the Caribbean, Emilio? Won't you just pop over to the Caribbean?
Fly down there for a coffee?
Yeah, why not?
when I'm in the Dominican Republic, then I can sit down with them and we can do the same thing.
Totally. And just, have the conversation. And you want that hiking guide that's been doing it for a long time. You don't want the hiking guide that read the book and, walked through the city park and now they're a hiking guide. Yeah.
I agree. All right, guys. Well, we're coming up on our timestamp here.
Yeah.
Any last minute messages we wanna give out while John's typing that up for our crowd here?
Breaches happen, and we don't want breaches to happen to you, and we don't want breaches to happen to us, and we don't want to see any breaches. We want the cyber criminals to get real jobs.
Yeah. I guess mine is, even though each of us three are in business, I think the reason we ended up in this position is just because we love helping people with IT. So, we like to tackle things with that approach first, right? We want to help you, and want IT. Obviously, our teams need to feed their families and everybody has to eat. But, we're here for questions. We're here for consultations. We're here to pick our brains. If you have to reach out to any of us, go ahead and reach out to any of us.
Okay, so let me get
like family.
Let me get this right before we close up and I post this. So I've got Emilio, West Florida, Ryan, New Mexico, and West Pennsylvania.
Eastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey.
Eastern. Oh, don't want to mess that up. Okay.
Mine is not West Florida. Mine is South Florida.
South Florida.
Yeah, just South Florida. Just say South Florida, and I'll take it from there.
And then I got mine in there. Is there another one for you, Ryan? New Mexico, East Pennsylvania?
Eastern Pennsylvania and New Jersey.
You're all over the place.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say that's a large footprint.
Like butter.
Okay. Comment lunch and your city. I'm sending it out now. Here it comes. It's going. You want lunch from one of the guys? Yeah. Comment.
Gotcha. And pick a good place for lunch too.
Awesome. Okay, guys. Well, I think we had a great conversation today. And I think really what we're talking about, to recap, is just really making sure you know where your business sits when it comes to cybersecurity. Like, are you actually protected? Do you actually have an idea of how much security you have, how much security you need for your type of business, and just to know exactly, what you should be doing and getting the right things in place. That's what we're here for.
All right, guys. I don't have anything else. I think I went over everything. If you need to be compliant, make sure you are. If you're not sure if you need to be compliant, talk to someone like us. Talk to your IT person about security. Otherwise, let's try to stay safe and preserve our small businesses out here.
Okay.
Have a wonderful week.
Yeah. See you guys next week.
See ya.
Everybody.